Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. My name is Joe and today I'm joined by Mark, aka the FPL General, who will be revealing his Game Week 1 draft as it is with just days to go before the game launches. Welcome, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well, Joe. Had a nice weekend. Hope you did too. And
Yes.
yeah, very exciting week. The home straight for game week 1, Friday night, 6:30 p.m. Friday deadline.
Yes.
So counting it down and yeah, looking forward to the deadline. I
Yeah.
think as most people are at this stage making too many changes. So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll lock in a few decisions today.
I remember I can't remember whether they launched on a Friday last year. I think it did.
Yeah.
I did because I had Gabrielle and I was cooking dinner and the news came through whilst I was cooking dinner that I didn't access. There was some leak that Gabrielle not playing, and I
Yeah.
didn't hear it. And so
The very
me,
famous
yeah,
leak.
yes. So I hope
And
there's nothing like that again. I might end up cooking again and ignoring it. And
probably
hopefully,
better off. I was in the same boat as you. I was at Fest last year in London, and I took a walk back to my hotel just to make sure I had decent Wi-Fi coverage for the deadline. And I did get the Gabriel news, maybe 6:27, but decided just to keep him in anyway
yeah,
because I think I had Chilwell on the bench, and
yeah.
yeah, wasn't a good start. But
No,
hopefully a calmer game week one
no.
deadline this year.
Okay, so before we get on, we'll be revealing your team. We'll have a look about some of the changes that happened over the weekend with the preseason, and I've got a few stats as well to hopefully help you out with some of your decisions, Mark. Before we do that, just want to mention that we are really happy at Fantasy Football Council to announce we've teamed up with Sleeper for the 24-25 season. I was especially excited because I thought it was the 90s indie band Sleeper, but it's not. But it's still exciting, Mark, and you know much more about it than I do.
Yeah, very exciting new game for us all to check out this season. First of all, it's free. There's no gambling, no crypto, nothing like that. So just very straightforward. They've got a pick'em league where you basically predict the result of each Premier League game every week. Not the scores, just the result. So Friday night, for example, Fulham Manchester United, you just pick who's going to win, or you call the draw. Then there's monthly leaderboards, overall leaderboards, and I think Scout are giving away about £7,500 worth of prizes for this.
Okay.
So very much worth entering, particularly when it's free. So there should be a link in the description for that. So check it out.
Good stuff. Good to hear. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little look at some ownership changes on the FPL app. Just a reminder, the Fantasy Football Scout has launched an app for this season, so you can have all those stats and information at your fingertips, particularly the integration with the planner tool, so you can plan weeks and weeks ahead, which is great. And also look at my wonderful tables that I make as well in the members area, like Goals Imminent, for example, which is back this season as a podcast that I'll be doing with Mark Jobling, that is, who is a writer at Fantasy Football Scout. I'll be doing that every week with him. But let's have a look at some ownership changes. This is from the app because there were some changes. Let's go with the first name in terms of gone up. So he's only gone up by 0.4% in ownership, but it's just an indication of how the market is going at the moment in terms of as people are constructing their teams. Solanke has moved from Bournemouth to Spurs. He's now in a fifth of teams, and he has two amazing fixtures with Leicester away and then Everton at home to start with. It looks like he's going to start as well. I've got a draft at the moment with him currently in my team, but I mean, are you tempted to either put him in, or have you just said no? I'm not going to have Solanke.
Yeah, I think it would be foolish just to rule him out straight away. So he's not in my draft, which we're going to see soon, but he's certainly probably the most exciting transfer that's happened Premier League wise from an FPL perspective because we know how good Solanke was last year in a bang average team. He was very much the talisman, and obviously moving to a very exciting attack minded front foot team now. So I think FPL managers are justifiably excited about it. I'm not surprised to see his ownership take a jump over the last 24 hours, and I think that'll continue to rise before the deadline. Postecoglou did say, as you mentioned, he's probably going to go straight in. He did that with Van de Ven, I think, a couple of days after he signed, so he's not afraid to do that. And lack of options up front for Tottenham anyway, with still question marks over Richarlison, etc. So I don't think I've ever seen so much knee jerking in my FPL career than I've seen in the last 24
Yeah,
hours. But I can get behind the Solanke one
yeah,
because the fixtures are good for us too.
yeah,
Proven FPL asset, and we think he's going to play.
yeah.
So yeah, I'll be asking myself, do I need to find money to squeeze him in?
Yeah, the manager pretty much said, yeah, he's going to start. Kulusevski, as you said, has been playing as a false nine, and he's not going to be carrying on with that. So Kulusevski's going to be out in the wide or an attacking midfield role. But yeah, so yeah, Solanke's going to start two great fixtures. So for me, the way I was constructing my team in terms of like juggling all the different prices, I pretty much come down to either getting a Solanke or a cheaper striker, or having Alexander Arnold from Liverpool or a cheaper defender. So that's the sort of structure, and one has a knock-on effect for lots of other things. But I mean, coming to Liverpool next, Alexander Arnold is back in the team, got an assist. Jota has been performing in a number 9 role for Liverpool in pre-season and got on the score sheet again. Salah has been out wide. He has been very effective in that role, as we know from many seasons. Whether he comes right, comes in, is wide, or comes centrally. But yeah, you talk about knee jerks. I mean, I've done it as well. Salah out, Jota in. I've gone without Salah before. I know what it's like, so I'm hardened to that. It was all I needed. I just needed that push. Are you tempted to do the same? Salah out for Jota.
I really enjoy, being on FPL Twitter this time of the season. Over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Jota is nowhere to be seen, not even being mentioned. And then you get to Monday
Yeah.
morning, and he is the Messiah. He's going to score 300 FPL points this year, never mind 200. I feel like I'm the only person on Twitter who hasn't made that switch yet. And again, like the Solanke one, I can understand it, but I do still feel like people are maybe putting too much faith in these preseason fixtures and minutes and performances and stuff like that. I still look at Liverpool on the FPL page and I see Jota, Darwin, Gakpo, Diaz, so many options, and for that reason, Jota he hasn't been on my watch list all summer, and I still don't think I'm going to add him this week. It's probably one that, the way I play the game, I'll probably swerve it. Now he could be a masterstroke in the first couple of game weeks, and people who are brave enough to do it, I do hope you get rewarded. But I think it's going to take a lot for me to get to Friday night and for Jota to appear in my squad. So I'm still leaning towards Salah, maybe Trent as well when it comes to Liverpool, because obviously they've got the great fixtures. But yeah, I'm not gonna overreact to one preseason friendly Sunday, in the middle of August.
Okay, so Jota now is in 6% and rising team. So he was in like not that many before. He's gone up 0.4%. So that's probably going to climb during the week as well. Also on this list, he's gone up 0.2% is Alexander Arnold. He was already in around a quarter of teams, and that sort of stays steady. But he's got a few more owners there as well. I find he's quite tricky to get in if you want Solanke and a credible rest of the team. I've found, but that's just me. You probably can have both, but if you cut some corners, because there's some enablers, and that's the two other names we're going to mention here in terms of the ownership changes in the last 24 hours. Is Smith Rowe at 5.5. He is in my team. He has been in for a while, pretty much with that move. If he's fit, he does really well, and he does look like he is fit and firing. He's in quite an attacking role, and I think he's got returns in both of the friendlies he's played for Fulham. I like the look of him. He's their record signing. I don't think he's under any threat. I think Pereira will either be alongside him or be behind him. Smith Rowe. He's in nearly 1 in 10 teams now. He's an enabler, but he's veering towards not being a differential enabler. Tempted?
Yeah, there's definitely temptation. I'm actually surprised his ownership has got that high so quickly. I would have guessed he would still be, 2 or 3%, but I guess it shows you, a lot of people are engaged already, even with a few days to go. We know how good Smith Rowe is, and hopefully it's a good move for his career. Again, I still take it with a pinch of salt. Looking back, I think it was the season where he scored 10 goals for Arsenal. And I seem to remember he was, getting one shot a game, and everything he touched was going in. He was getting a lot of those goals off the bench as well, in 15-minute appearances. So I would like to see a bigger sample size before I would like to put a lot of faith in him. But again, as a punt goes in game week 1, I think one punt, maybe even two, is absolutely fine. We've got the fixtures for Fulham. We know that. We've been harping on about them. They're top of the fixture ticker. Smith Rowe's going to play an attacking role. He's going to be breaking into the box. We know he can finish. He's been reminded of that us of that in these preseason games. So I think a lot of teams will come down to which 5.5 million midfielder do I go for, or which 5.5 million forward do I go for? And whether you go 3-4-3 or 3-5-2, I think Smith Rowe is very much in the
Yeah.
conversation now. And I still like Andres Pereira, maybe hopefully a few more avenues to points with set pieces, maybe penalties for Pereira as well. So, but again, I still think it's a very close call. And yeah, I think Smith Rowe has to be in the conversation.
Yeah, I think as we spoke about last week, Muniz up front for Fulham is not on penalties. It'll be Pereira. It was Willian before, so it does look that way. Certainly in the running for penalties. But another player that I'm thinking of in that Smith Rowe spot is Minter at Brighton. I'm convinced he's going to start now. He's just looked like the best player in pre-season. Yeah, I think he's got the nod over Dingra, and Solly March is not available, so I think he's pretty nailed on. It's just the fixtures. Fulham, as you said, they've got Manchester United to start, but then they've got Leicester at home, Ipswich away, and then 4 and 5, West Ham at home and Newcastle at home. So both home games, both good for Smith Rowe. But if they're saying injury, game week 4, well, Minter has got Ipswich and Nottingham Forest at Brighton. I mean, I'm as a Brighton fan, I'm really tempted just to get Minter in anyway. But I have to think with an FPL head, not a fan's head, and just go. Fulham have just had better early fixtures. The first 3 definitely.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
people need to, don't be put off Fulham assets because of Manchester United first. I was looking at stats again this week on the Scout website. Just a reminder, United were the 5th worst defence last season in terms of expected goals conceded. First game of the season, Fulham are going to be right up for it. So I would quite happily, I might end up with an attacker from both teams for the first fixture of the
yeah.
season, which is exciting in itself. So yeah, Smith Rowe, Pereira, Muniz, these are all viable picks.
And Barco is another name, is also in the top 5 of ownership changes. Yeah, he has been in my team for a while. He's also been playing in pre-season. He looks to get the nod. There's rumours that Brighton might be bolstering their moves in the fullback department. But as far as we know at the moment, Barco is definitely going to start the season. I mean, I'm even tempted to play him in game week 1. But yeah, he's in, and this surprised me because he was in about 4% of teams when I got him in. He's in, and that's not me being a hipster, although it is. I'm a hipster. But Barco is in 16.4% of teams, and that's growing. So he's in the top 5 for ownership changes last 24 hours. Yeah, I think you have to be aware that Estupinan is going to come back in game week 4 or 5 or 6. So Barker, I don't think he's long. He could be long term, but we don't know if he's long term yet. But he's definitely the best 4 million short term pick, I think.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go as far as saying he's a no-brainer to start with
Okay.
because of his price, and we think he's going to play, and also because I think a lot of people wildcard relatively early, even if you don't wildcard till 5, 6, 7, you can probably carry him if he does become a dead asset on the bench. Set pieces are possible. Even his ownership. I don't tend to let ownership impact me, but a lot of people will be getting Barco off their benches or playing him like you might, and even just to protect yourself if he does pick up that assist from a corner or something, it's going to hurt because his ownership is going to be high. So yeah, I think he's the best 4 million going into the season, and as long as you don't go into the season relying on him to start in your team every week, then I think it's an easy pick.
And I'll just quickly do some of the names that have gone down in changes. These are very minimal, the sort of 0.1, 0.3% changes. But nevertheless, these are the players that people have got rid of this week as they've started to perhaps move from a default team to an actual team, or perhaps they're just moving these players out. Gordon has actually played in a friendly. He scheduled 45 minutes. He wanted to play more. He's gone down in ownership, but he's still in 3 in 10 teams. He hasn't gone anywhere from my team, and because from last season, Gordon, no matter what the rumours were around him starting or injured, he played. Basically, he played, and also he does well at home, and he's at home against Southampton first game. I mean, I just think he's an amazing asset again, and I cannot imagine him being benched.
Yeah, I think I share similar views to you on Gordon. I had him in my very first draft when the game launched, and he's in my most recent one. He probably dropped out once or twice, but I think himself and Isak, they almost come as a pair nowadays in my mind. They can certainly link up well with each other. Good fixtures, still like the price, and I suppose some people maybe are selling maybe a little bit. There's been a lot of speculation around Gordon, with links to Liverpool and elsewhere, but I don't think anything will happen. And like you, I feel like Gordon's a bit like Saka at Arsenal. If he's anyway fit, he'll start the game.
Yeah,
So I do expect when the Newcastle team sheet comes out to see him on it. Yeah, maybe it's 70 minutes, but even 70 minutes, home to Southampton should be enough for something. So he's in my team. He's been in a lot of my drafts. I still quite like Bruno Fernandes for an extra million if I can find it, but there's every chance Gordon survives for now.
Um, there's three players I'm going to mention here: Odegaard, Foden, and Palmer. And I can kind of see why. I kind of know why their ownership has dipped. Odegaard, because I think because people have removed Salah and got Jota in, they've suddenly got more money, and so they beefed up Odegaard to Saka. I think that's exactly what's happened there. Foden, we know he's not going to start. I think he's only coming back to training this week, so he is not going to start game week 1. No way. But he could in game week 2. So people have cottoned on to that minus 0.3% drop. And Palmer as well. He's only had 45 minutes of pre-season. Just come back. There's just too many unknowns with Chelsea, I think. And also the people have looked at that first fixture and just said, Man City, not interested in that. Although Chelsea's fixtures are brilliant thereafter. Yeah, I mean, Wolves, Crystal Palace, Bournemouth, West Ham, Brighton, the next fixtures. But it's Watkins I was quite surprised by, because I would have thought more people would have had more money. Watkins is nailed on, and I guess it's those opening 2 fixtures are tough with West Ham and Arsenal, but they're really good thereafter. And I just think he can do well in any match, home, away, against any opposition. But yeah, I was quite surprised to see why Watkins was suddenly dropped now, because if anything, I would have thought, well, he's back with the team. He's their talisman. Surely he's going to start.
Probably the Solanke factor is the is the reason
yeah.
for Watkins dropping.
Yeah, you're right.
So people are getting very excited about Solanke. They're thinking 1.5 million. Can I get as much from Solanke as I can from Watkins? Maybe.
Yeah, you're right.
And
Yeah.
I don't think Watkins has played any minutes yet either preseason. That might be worrying people. That again, like Gordon, I expect Watkins to turn up in game week 1. But I suppose there's those slight doubts there. But yeah, certainly I think Solanke on the left of this chart and Watkins on the right, there's definitely a link between those two.
Okay, so these are the sort of changes that have happened and the developments over the weekends, which have certainly changed my team and might have contributed to some changes in your team as well, Mark. So we're just going to put your team up now, and then we'll come to some of those sort of decisions as we go along. I'll put your team up on the screen, and for the benefit of those listening to the podcast version, I'll just read this out, and then we'll dive back in and you can talk about it. So you got Henderson in goal, Munoz, Pedro Porro, Gvardiol in a 3-4-3 with Eze, Mohamed Salah, Nkunku, Gordon, and then up front, João Pedro has got the nod in that sort of cheaper striker berth. Haaland and Isak, who is your captain. And on your bench, you've got a sort of a 4 million dud goalkeeper. It's the Everton backup. You've got Barco as your first sub, Sangare, who we spoke about last week, and I've seen him in a lot of other teams since, so it looks nailed on, and Harwood Bellis as well. So cheap, but starters, well, apart from the goalkeeper. So what? Before we look at, say, the defence, but what overall was your thinking by this, and how did it change over the weekend?
So I suppose first of all, nothing has really changed for me over the weekend. I put very little stock in preseason fixtures, so I don't even watch them. I'll keep an eye on the minutes of the players and more so than anything else, and maybe fitness levels of certain players if there's any doubts over those. So that's why players like Jota, Solanke with the transfer, they haven't appeared in my team yet. That doesn't mean they won't appear this week, but I'm always just a little bit slower maybe to react to those things, and I certainly don't overreact and I don't overthink her either. I've only made 3 or 4 drafts all summer. and I'm trying to, I'm not going to make one every day this week. So they're in my thoughts, of course. Bob's another one at Manchester City, who people seem to think will get the start of the season at least. And again, I'm not going to rule him out because I think it would be foolish to do so. So everything's on the table at the moment. No player is locked in and no player is ruled out. So overall, it's very fluid, and I think. I think it actually could be quite difficult Friday to, or even Thursday night, just to finalise a team because we spoke about it all summer. They've got the prices right. There's a lot of players emerging, even over the last couple of days. I think it's a fascinating start to the season because we know how important it is to get a good start. So I'm nowhere near close. Talk you through a couple of things. Henderson's been in almost every draft. I liked seeing news that Johnston might leave because that solidifies Henderson for me. I think he will be my 4.5 goalkeeper. In defence, Munoz has been in every draft, and I don't see him moving either. Porro, just for attacking potential, two good fixtures at the start. Gvardiol, we'll talk about him later. Gvardiol versus Trent is still a consideration for me. I've still got Salah. I think I've had Salah in every draft, 3 or 4 drafts, but I think maybe my 5th draft, which will come in a couple of days' time, I'll make a team without Salah because let's just say if I take Salah out here, and I'm not really keen on Jota, so let's even just say Saka goes in there. Then straight away, Gvardiol could become Trent, Joe Pedro could probably become Solanke. You can very quickly make upgrades, and the same goes for Haaland if he comes out as well. So, not too much has changed, and there's still a few question marks in here.
Okay, well, I'll talk about the defence overall. So you mentioned what we're going to do. I'm going to put up a heat map of Gvardiol and Alexander-Arnold to compare them in a sec. But it's more just sort of, as you said, they priced it quite well this season, annoyingly well. So that means for every player you've got in that's good, there's another player that's good that you haven't got in. So yes, you mentioned Alexander-Arnold if you're Gvardiol. If you to have Gvardiol and Alexander-Arnold would be difficult. So then people would say, hey, you've got Alexander-Arnold, but you haven't got Gvardiol. But the other omission is Arsenal's defence. And I know we shouldn't pay much heed to ownership, but I had a quick look at the ownership of Raya, Gabriel and Saliba. Both of those centre-backs annoyingly scored at the weekend, by the way. And it was getting towards 100%. So if there is an Arsenal clean sheet and you don't have an Arsenal defender and the player that you've got in that place doesn't keep a clean sheet, you're 4 points down. And I know it's only 4 points, but early on, these things, you're basically sort of behind on that particular move there. And I think with Wolves at home, there is every chance there will be a clean sheet there. So I've explored options with Raya and Gabriel. And I do think they look good, although they've got a Villa in game week 2, but I do think there's room for attacking threat from those centre-backs, but also for clean sheets at Wolves at home in the opening game week. And then also for Arsenal, they got Brighton at home. There could be a clean sheet there, although Brighton are attacking. Tottenham, anything goes, and then Man City. So got 4 and 5 are tough, and then game week 6. So if you're looking sort of a longer horizon, they got Leicester at home. I kind of Do you feel a bit naked with that Arsenal defence?
Yeah, definitely. When you read out those numbers, combined heading towards 100%. I don't like betting against the best defence from last season. So again, I always try and just simplify FPL, and I often just think, what would a casual do logging in on Friday, 5 minutes before the deadline? They would just pick an Arsenal defender, and they'd probably do quite well out of it, over the long term. So I'm certainly not ruling it out. It could be instead of Gvardiol or Trent, but it also could be instead of Pedro Porro. I'm not 100% wedded to a Tottenham defender. We know they don't keep any clean sheets, and we know Porro will probably be negatively affected in the BPS system this season as well. So maybe spending 0.5 extra from Porro to Gabriel, it's probably going to give you more points over the season. Will it be enough to justify the 0.5 extra spend? I think there's a good chance it would. So Gabriel certainly could make an appearance on my team this week.
Yeah, I've just quickly added it up to make sure I wasn't giving duff information. Yeah. Raya, he's in quarter of teams. Saliba's in 4 out of 10, or 2 out of 5 if you want to put it down there. Gabriel is in 12% of teams. White similar, 12%, well 11.7% So that all adds up to, well, I don't know about maths, but maths not my
Near
strong
enough.
point. But yeah, near enough, 100% there. So you're definitely betting against an Arsenal clean sheet there. However, if you go for say Raya and and then Henderson gets a clean sheet, well then that's fine. But yeah, that's and the other issue is the Liverpool defence, or rather specifically Alexander Arnold. There is also the option of Quansah at the moment, who it looks like will get the nod in the Ipswich game. There's still, Kanate could come in, but it could be Quansah. He was certainly in the sort of A team. There were two teams that Liverpool put out in pre-season. One very much looked like the A team. It was Diaz, Salah, Jota, Van Dijk, Alexander Arnold. And the B team was like sort of your Darwin Núñez and Elliott and Jones and that kind of thing. So it was pretty obvious that was the B team. But yeah, here's a picture of Gvardiol and Alexander Arnold's heat map, and in the player comparison tool on Fantasy Football Scout. Annoyingly, they're roughly about 50% each in terms of the various metrics: assists, goals, expected goals, those types of things. Alexander Arnold is marginally better in 7 key ones, but they pretty much, the heat map shows, I mean, this basically looks like a smoker's lung, or radioactive smoker's lung. Gvardiol is just up and down that touchline there. And Alexander Arnold is up and down his touchline there. But he is also on corners, is it showing? And both of them are getting towards the box, the penalty box as well. I mean, they both look good. And I don't think you can, I don't know. I mean, yeah, this is your decision. Who are you going to pick?
Yeah, I certainly don't think I'll end up with both. So it has to be one or the other. And I think I do want one of them. Even if a Gabriel came in, I think it would be more likely for Porro than a Gvardiol or a Trent. So again, I think there's unknowns with both of these players. We don't know if Gvardiol will, be as aggressive in the final third as he was last season. Pep could change tack as he often does and use him slightly differently. Trent, new manager, don't know exactly what role he's going to play either. But what we do know is two fantastic players, and we know what they can do when they get in the final third. Trent in particular. So, in an ideal world, I think I would have Trent, but 1 million is a lot of money when you look at other positions. And again, when I think about clean sheets, I think clean sheets have maybe gone up in value with other things contributed negatively to defenders in the bonus points. So just keeping things simple, an Arsenal defender and a City defender to start the season, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it, and adjust accordingly afterwards. So maybe an Arsenal defender, a City defender +1 is a sensible approach. So yeah, I think I'm probably slightly leaning towards Gvardiol. Back more for clean sheets, 1 million cheaper, and then maybe use the million elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, when I was, looking at these two as well, exactly the same issue, and I'm sure lots of the viewers and listeners have gone through this as well. And I just found that 1 million was quite big. It felt big. It's a difference between, well, having a Smith Rowe or Minter or a 4.5 midfielder. I mean, that's the sort of difference you're looking at there. It can be the difference in getting Solanke in and not having Solanke. But just looking through your team, another thing that I noticed over the weekend as I was making changes, and I started to look back, the voice of Zophar from FPL Wire was ringing around my head. He often does. And he often has very succinct, wise words. And one of them was get good players from good teams. And I noticed one of the things that he does is he tries to get good players from good teams, but the good teams bit, so he gets the top. So Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Newcastle, it's these types of top teams, top attacking teams that can keep clean sheets. And I noticed the changes that I made over the weekend. Suddenly I had, it looked like more coverage from those teams. A bit more Spurs, a bit more Liverpool, a bit more Arsenal, a bit less Palace, a bit less Fulham, a bit less Brighton. Do you feel that as well? Do you feel that with your team at the moment, do you think it needs a bit more of that, or are you happy with the Palaces and the Brightons and the Fulhams and those types of players?
I don't feel great about this draft. There's a lot of good players in there, but it just doesn't feel like it's the right draft for me. And it's interesting you mentioned Zof there because we often speak to each other and we joke
Mm,
that we're, brothers from other mothers. We play very similar
mm,
FPL,
yeah.
very patient, very sensible, not too many risks. So I think one of the reasons I'm probably not happy with this draft is because there's three Palace players, there's two Brighton, there's, Newcastle's fine. There's an Nkunku who's maybe got a few question marks, but like you say, there's no Arsenal.
Mm,
There's not enough Liverpool. Maybe another City player could come in. So yeah, I do think, especially at this point in the season, those of us who've been active on the FPL website for the last couple of weeks, we overthink and we overcomplicate.
mm,
I always say FPL is a simple game, which we overcomplicate. And this is probably a good example. Looking at my team, why is there no Arsenal?
mm,
Yeah, the fixtures might not be perfect, but from first three
yeah.
they're good. What more evidence do I want from last season about how good Saka is, how
Mm,
good Gabriel is, how good David Raya is,
mm,
FPL wise. So yeah, I think I need to revisit and take those sage words from Zof and think,
yeah.
do I have enough good players from
Yeah.
good teams? Because the good teams score the most FPL points.
Yeah, I hope that viewers and listeners, if anything, they take from FPL guidance, good players from good teams. It sounds like the most trite, basic thing to say, but it's the most valuable lesson that we all forget.
Yeah, we
So
do.
yeah. Um, okay. I'm just going to put the fixtures up again because of your midfield. Because I just want to sort of stress test the midfield. So you say you're obviously not happy with this, but I think in terms of fixtures, it's a good mix. Not necessarily the players, but the teams they're from. So Salah, Liverpool, they've got Ipswich, Brentford, Manchester United, Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, Wolves. It's a great run. You've got Eze, Crystal Palace, a pretty good run as well. They're third on the fixture ticker next six. Brentford, West Ham. They do have Chelsea, but then they've got Leicester, Manchester United, and Everton. Anthony Gordon, we spoke about earlier as well. Newcastle, great run of fixtures early on, definitely. Southampton, Bournemouth, Tottenham, brilliant for attacking the Tottenham at home. And then they got Wolves and Fulham away, and Manchester City at home. And it's sort of around then I might think, I might move Gordon on. And then you got Nkunku. Chelsea, yes, they do have Man City, but then they got Wolves, Crystal Palace, Bournemouth, West Ham, and Brighton. They've actually, I think, pretty much top from game week 2 up until 6. But the two things I was thinking of, I personally haven't gotten Nkunku, but I can't tell whether it's my Brighton bias against Chelsea, and the fact that I'm looking at Chelsea. Chelsea seem like a mess at the moment. They're buying like every player known to known under the sun, and they've got except Son, who would be a good buy
I was
for
just
them.
about to say, exception.
And at the same time, they're getting rid of like players that really care about the club, like Gallagher, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of cohesion of they. There's nothing there that excites me, and they're a wait and see for me. But I think Gordon's good because for the first three, and then you can move him on because away he's not as good. And I was thinking, if you're going for short term, I think it's you can look at loads in that category that might be good by then. Brian and Bomo, for example, was 7 million. There could be some of these emerge. Well, game week 4 and 5, you can just drop down to Minter or Matoma. You can afford a Matoma. Ooh. So there's other assets you can get in, but yeah, there's two things going on there. My lack of faith in Chelsea, and I think Gordon's good, but also very removable soon.
Yeah, and again, a player that I'm warming to a lot more as we get closer to the season because he fits my style of management more than an Nkunku. Someone like a Gibbs White at
Mm,
Forest because talisman, set pieces, penalties, hopefully fixtures. Forest played Bournemouth home, Southampton away, Wolves home. That just feels warm and cozy. And then you can assess an Nkunku, a Minte, and 10, 15 other
yeah.
players who could eventually take that spot around game week 4. So yeah, Gibbs White is higher on my radar now than he was all summer. And Nkunku is certainly a player I wouldn't have went with in game week 1 last season. So I should be asking myself, why am I going there again when there's still uncertainty? They've got 75 first team players. They've got a new manager. There's, like you say, no cohesion. So maybe it is best to just wait, especially when there is Man City in the first game. I always like the line, you don't have to be the first person to own a player. And maybe that's the case with Nkunku for a Man City
Yeah.
fixture. You could always go there game week 2, game week 3 if it becomes clear that you need to
Mm.
go there. But the 6.5 million spot in my midfield is certainly up for grabs.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, in any drafts I've had with Nkunku, I've had him as the first bench for game week 1,
Makes
and
sense.
and with a Pedro, for example, like is in your team, and that makes sense. Or if you've got for a midfielder, say Rodgers, for example, Aston Villa, Oscar Bob would be another one for Manchester City. But yeah, I mean, but overall, if I haven't got any 6.5 mids in my team at the moment, I'll spend a bit more because I've got all that Salah cash. But if I did, I'm with you. Morgan Gibbs White would be the one because the fixtures are great for Nottingham Forest. And I mean, I don't have Chris Wood in my team, and once again, I've got to think with my FPL head on rather than get Chris Wood because he's brilliant and he's low owned, and you always shoot up the rankings having Chris Wood in your team. But
Here's a
yeah,
quick here's a difficult question for you then as a Brighton fan and Chelsea hater. They're my words, not yours. If you ended up in game week 1 with an 11th and a 12th man, Barco versus Nkunku, who would you start?
game week 1.
Game week 1, Barco or Nkunku?
Oh, Barco. I mean,
What a
that says it
fixture.
all about my
Yeah.
Nkunku. And if you think that as well, even 20% of you thinks that, then Nkunku's not your man.
Yeah, maybe that's again. This is why I enjoy these videos. It make me
Yeah.
think maybe Nkunku shouldn't be in at all.
Yeah, it's my mission. Whilst the Chelsea owner wants to accumulate all the players in the world, my mission is for every FPL manager not to have any Chelsea players, apart from Palmer because he's brilliant. Okay, let's have a look at your forwards. So you got Pedro, Haaland, and Isak. And if any of them were to go, I would imagine since Isak's your captain, Haaland, it could be Pedro that would go. So I've got a list of strikers, and I've put Solanke in here because I guess aside from thinking, do you go for Pedro or Chris Wood or Muniz at Fulham, you might also think, well, can I get a little bit more? Couple of million more from somewhere and get Solanke in. So we thought it'd be good to compare them. I've also got Armstrong's just goals and assists from last season just to show how potent he is as well. I've sorted this by minutes per expected goal involvement. Pedro is the best. He's won 60 fouls. He's next to Everton and Manchester United at home. He has started in 19 through injury and De Zerbi just rotating so much. But yeah, Pedro's top of this one. He's in your team as well. I don't know whether you'd seen a table like this, but I mean, why Pedro initially over any of these other players?
Simply price and pens is probably the two main reasons.
Okay.
Because Salah and Haaland and Gvardiol are in this draft, it kind of leaves you with a decision 5.5 mid or midfielder. Yeah, midfielder or forward, I should say. You can probably stretch to 6 somehow. I've had Muniz basically all summer, and it only became João Pedro recently just to bump up one or two other positions. But Pedro, I was there game week 1 last season. Do I want to do it again? I just find I really rate the player, but I don't know how much I rate him as an FPL asset. You just don't really know what you're going to get. You don't know what position he's going to play. We probably are relying a lot on penalties for the points as well. So again, that makes me second guess. Number one, it makes me think: do I go 3-5-2 instead with
Yep.
Smith Rowe, who we mentioned, or Andreas or something like that, or more importantly, do I find cash for Solanke? And I think that's the question I'll be asking myself this week because I'm not too concerned about game week 1. I think he'll start, and even if he didn't start in game week 1, I wouldn't care too much. 30 minutes, I'd be happy because Solanke could end up being a player that you pick in game week 1 and he's still there in game week 38.
Yeah.
I rate him that highly, and I think it's a good fit for him. We know how Tottenham play.
Yeah.
So for me, it's still a question of, I still think Muniz I like most if I'm going to only spend 6 or less. But then it's a case of, do I just take Salah out and go for a Saka
Yeah.
or a Son? and in that case, Solanke comes in,
Yeah.
and I think there's a good chance that will happen.
Yeah, I mean, I came to the conclusion all of these, Pedro, Wood, Muniz, are all been in my drafts, and then I thought, who's better out of them and Solanke? And Solanke wins. And then you just got to find a bit of money elsewhere, and then it just looked a bit better for me. But I'll just read out some of these stats for the benefit of those listening on the podcast. Chris Wood, who is my favourite of the 6 million, he's next in minutes per expected goal involvement every 144 minutes, 20 starts. It's that, but fixtures: Bournemouth at home, Southampton away, minutes per shot on target every 73 minutes. And his cost is just 6 million. Solanke is just behind Chris Wood there, 153 minutes per expected goal involvement. That is with Bournemouth though last season. These are all last season stats. And then Muniz is at every 168 minutes per expected goal involvement. He's got Manchester United first, then Leicester. So they've all got sort of okay, good fixtures. And they're all much of a muchness in terms of attacking threat. These are all good strikers. And Armstrong you can put in there as well. He got 21 goals, 13 assists in 46 games in the Championship level. So you can count him in there as well. He's gone a bit off the radar for people, but people shouldn't ignore them. The conclusion, I mean, it's no wonder that a lot of the analytics people that I listen to is they don't have the Haaland or Salah at all. They have 3 of these guys because they're all good, and then they can have Son, Saka, Palmer, whoever in midfield, and maybe that is the way to go.
Yeah, because I mean, the game we play is we're looking for value for money spent over a season, and historically, 5.5, 6 million forwards have a very good chance of being good bang for their buck. So I can totally understand why people are going for 2 of them. Some people will go all the way and get 3. I don't like that for price point reasons, but 2 is fine, and certainly most will have 1. And I'm not going to rule out Armstrong either. I'm not keen on Chris Wood. I just don't like him longer term, but I do think Armstrong could be a good set and forget. He might even be on your bench some weeks if he can manage that. But I think think about what's happened over the weekend. I think what you're going to see this week is a huge movement of Salah out, Jota in, and then a cheap striker out, Solanke in, and then you're going to have we're going to end up having a very strong template, which we hope we wouldn't. But I think in those maybe midfield and forward positions we will. People like me might not go to Jota, but will go maybe Saka instead or Son. But certainly I think Haaland, Isak, Solanke. It's going to be very hard to bet against any of those 3. And that could be where I end up.
Yeah, I mean, it's important what you said about Solanke. If you imagine a striker will be in your team for the whole season, and I can only ever think of one striker that I've had in my team all season before, and that was Darren Bent when he was at Sunderland. 7 million, and he scored pretty much every week. It was a question of how many, not Willie. And he was, you couldn't get rid of him. It was just, no matter what went fixtures with Sunderland, he would always score. And I just wonder, with a player like Solanke at an attacking team like Tottenham, I think you could be right there. And I just think, price-wise, he could be 8.5 million by Christmas.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny you mentioned Darren Bent because Jermaine Defoe came to mind for me there as well, kind of similar. On Solanke, I've seen a few people kind of question the move as well, and saying, it's not going to work out or whatever, but this guy was producing incredible numbers for a Bournemouth team that didn't have a huge amount of creative players. So what can he do when he's got really good players around him? And I'm excited to see that, and I want to be part of that. So I think I'm going to end up there before the end of the week.
And you have to sort of look at teams' recruitment as well. And I look at Ange's Tottenham in terms of recruitment and the players they've sort of brought in over that time, the Brennan Johnsons, and they've all been pretty successful, I would say. Pedro Porro as well. During that time,
as well.
They may sort of predate him slightly, but in recent times they've got players that seem to fit them. And so if they're getting Solanke, if it was Chelsea getting Solanke, I would think, who knows what's going to happen there, because he's going to be
playing goal.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Who knows? But when it's a team like Brentford, Brighton, Spurs, I think at the moment, I don't know about Manchester United's recruitment. You're a Manchester United fan. I think I get the sense there's improvement there. But if it was the Manchester United of say 2 seasons ago or last season, if they got a new striker in, I'll just take it or leave it. I just don't know, how they're going to be. But yeah, there's certain teams. I just think with Spurs, I get the sense they're a little bit better recruitment wise recently.
Just on Solanke as well, Joe. You and I talk a lot about price points, and starting with a Solanke is a lot easier than getting to a Solanke.
Yeah.
Solanke for Leicester and Everton. If it doesn't work out, then you've got Muniz, João Pedro,
Yeah.
and 2 game weeks of
Wow.
information.
Yeah.
So it just makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Pedro, Wood, Muniz, Armstrong, brilliant. You've got all of those options to move down to if Solanke doesn't work out, and I do think it will. But yeah, Mark, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks so much for revealing your team. I'll just put it back up on screen so people can say farewell to it. You've indicated that this may change. Just before we go, what do you think? Just following our chat, is your main takeaway from this in terms of what you might sort of try out ahead of Friday?
I like that you said let people say farewell because I'm going to say farewell to this draft as well, and I'm going to start from scratch after this video. I think my next draft it won't have Salah. That'll be the cash cow. That will allow for Solanke for João Pedro. It probably allows for Trent over Gvardiol as well, but I'm going to play around. I'm going to plug in Gabriel for a day or two to see how that feels. Gordon and Nkunku are definitely not sure things. Players like Gibbs White are kind of floating around my mind as maybe safer to start with. And I would like the bench to be a little bit stronger. So if I could make that happen, I would. I would like to have a João Pedro or an Armstrong as a first sub or a Smith Rowe or a Pereira. It's very, very hard to do that. But I think it could be a nice position to be in. So
Yeah.
that's just a couple of things we want to play around with.
Okay.
So hopefully I'm a bit closer after this video.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining me. Hopefully we've given those watching and those listening some food for thought there as we look ahead to Friday evening's deadline. Just a reminder, do press that like button. It really helps us out. Leave a 5-star review if you can when you're listening to this. Also, do leave a comment. Let us know what you think. As long as it's nice, and if it's not, then just don't bother. But thanks so much for your time. Good luck with your final decisions, Mark. Look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Yeah, cheers. Just to say as well, everyone, do make sure you hit subscribe because myself and Joe will be here all season on General's Orders on the Scout YouTube. So hit subscribe. Best of luck for Game Week 1, and we'll pick the bones of it next week.
Indeed. See you soon. Take care.
Bye bye.